Hello, everyone. Glad to have you join us. Today, Dr. Adam Pease and myself, Viru Mirji, we're going to talk about AI ontology in health informatics. Welcome to our session. This is a brief video where we'd like to talk about the current challenges in healthcare, digital health, and how AI applies to that. With that, let me just introduce myself. I am Viru Mirji, a VP at WinWire Technologies, focusing on AI and data technology solutions. Been in the consulting business for more than 25 years and focused a lot of my time on innovative solutions for using AI. And Dr. Adam Pease, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, thanks, Vero. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about things. So I'm the founder of Articulate Software, an AI consultancy I founded about 20 years ago, at which time I had also started work on the Sumo Ontology, which we'll be talking about.
Great. Thank you for that. I mean, you have done tremendous work in this field for so many years now, so I'm hoping this will be educational as well as, very valuable conversation for all of us. So let's get started. I'll stop this and let's look at what we are talking about are current challenges in healthcare industry, especially post-COVID. So many things have changed. Healthcare is being given a lot more importance nowadays than before. A lot of innovation, a lot of acceleration, new clinical trials which are being speeded up. There's so much happening. And recently I read an article from Deloitte, where they had done some research and they were talking about how 4 things matter the most today. And we'll talk about some of this today. A challenge in connectivity because people are remote. Challenge in continuity when you start your interaction with your provider, doctor. How do you continue that, problem resolution life cycle? Coordinating various activities end to end across the different value chain and the supply chain of insurance, etc. And then finally, consumer access and consumer information. And that's where we'll focus most of our time today to talk about the quality of data and how AI can help in providing access to good quality information. So with that, what do you think, Dr. Adam, what do you think are the top challenges today in healthcare?
Yeah, so certainly there is the challenge of privacy, which I don't think we'll talk about today. Obviously, that's a very central issue. But to touch on the different communities or purposes that you've just mentioned, the one overarching challenge amongst them is the context of information and the meaning of information. The same information may be presented in radically different ways for physicians, for hospital administrators, and for the end user, the patient, him or herself. Getting that context right is essential. And right now, I would say that computer science as an industry is not really great about capturing that context or capturing information that's independent of context that allows it to be presented in a coherent way to different communities.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the context is really critical here. And what I have a feeling is AI, as it was coined many years ago, the true AI is still not here, right? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've had tremendous advances in small areas, right? So some things that are that appear almost magical, right? The ability for a machine to recognize faces, obviously, a huge thing that the consumer sees that wasn't possible before. But things like having a machine understand rather than just be able to retrieve a relevant conversation, that's still seems to be well out of reach. And the things that the scientific industry is doing today to address those problems really fall in the realm of pattern matching. So it's recognition, recognizing that a question is relevant maybe to a conversation or a document. And that's very different than understanding.
True, true. And so, to keep things simple for new audiences, AI can be simply divided into cognition and recognition, right? The recognition part is more the pattern matching and just using data, training your AI systems so that it can recognize patterns and then you can make some decisions on it. While on the other hand, we have cognition, which requires true understanding, the meaning behind it. So, like let's take the scenario of patient care, right? And the whole patient life cycle as we go along. Nowadays, people can't go to the clinic. They are remote and, they have to use telehealth or other mechanisms. In that kind of scenario, there's a lot of exchange of information happening between the two different locations and two different, parties. Maybe there are more than two parties also involved. And I'm thinking that quality of data matters, the translation of data matters, and how you automate or manage the life cycle in a digital health manner matters a lot. What are your thoughts about AI specifically on the cognition side? Since you're an authority in ontology, can you talk a little bit about how you see that applying here?
Yeah, one thing about context is it requires shared context, right? So if people don't share the same context, their interpretation of data is different. And the same is true in computers and software. Give the same data to two different programs, and unless they were designed to have the same understanding and use that data to the same end, they're going to have different context. And this can be disastrous in software interchange. And is, I think, underlying a lot of bugs in software of when we're trying to integrate software systems, we as programmers or systems integrators may not even understand the original intent of an element of a schema. And if we get that wrong, and the software makes an assumption that's different than the original assumptions about what things mean, then that's a source of bugs. So one of the points of my work and my whole career has been, how do we make these assumptions explicit? How do we start working really more with what I call dictionaries for computers to read, where the definitions, the meaning of the data is explicit and can be shared. Right now in computer science, we mostly just rely on labels. Programmers create a database, they give it some labels, and they assume that the context of the reader of that data is going to be the same as their context, and it rarely is, and that's a problem.
Can you give us an example with healthcare in mind? Let's think about a situation where there's some diagnosis happening. Can an example with ontology?
Yeah, so let's go back to, there's a great example really at the dawn of AI with Stanford professor John McCarthy was dealing with some early medical information systems, a medical expert system. And so he was typing in some information about disease. So the patient had a red skin color, the patient had some blotchy skin, a host of other things. This is just, of course, a story. I don't know if John McCarthy, Dr. McCarthy, was pulling everybody's leg, but the end result was that the diagnosis system came back to give a particular medical diagnosis of a skin condition. But the whole time, this was all done tongue-in-cheek, and Professor McCarthy was describing a rusty car in his backyard. So the context of the data was completely different. The system that he was working with was designed only to worry about patients with skin diseases, not cars with rusty steel shells. So the context matters. Machines don't have this common sense, and they need it.
Yep. I agree. I mean, I think, this can go beyond that also in terms of, let's say we are talking about psychology, or we're talking about the mental health of our patients, and we're talking to them remotely. How do we interpret that? It's not just the words, but also the interpreting their actions, their video, their audio, right? Well, the tone of their, talks. Maybe they are nervous, maybe they are feeling some symptoms that we need to analyze. So all of that, I think it would be great to be able to have that knowledge kind of store, or a gold mine of information by which you can refer and say, okay, this means that, or this is related to that, and this could be a derivative of something else. So that's very interesting. And in fact, WinWire is spending a lot of its time right now, and for many years now, focusing on data mining and knowledge mining. Now we have a solution called Knowledge Miner, and it focuses on trying to take all these ICD-10 clinical methods, the CM codes, and map it back to articles, map it back to knowledge posts that have been made by different researchers, and then map it to RX norm codes, etc. So that's why it helps people to research and get to the point quickly. I believe ontology can play a big role in in this way. AI is still new, even though it's been here since 1956, but as a technology, it is new, and people keep shuffling between machine learning or other cognitive services, cognitive techniques that can be applied, symbolic AI and non-numeric AI, uh, fuzzy AI, right? We can talk about it in different ways, but I feel that I don't know whether you agree, but we need a combination of the two. It cannot be just one or the other. It can't be just machine learning or just ontology. Maybe if we combine the two together and use it in the right way, then we can get to that level of sophistication. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely right. So approximately every 10 years, AI has shifted between a focus on symbolic methods and a focus on numeric methods. And whatever method we seem to be in the middle of is part of the hype cycle. And the narrative tends to be that other stuff doesn't work, and this is what we're working on now, and this is the answer. But the reality, I think, is that we need both of these broad techniques.
Yeah.
And whatever area the most people are working on is going to see the most progress. And so that's why it sort of shifts in and out of favor. People work on an area for a while, they kind of mine that area out, and the big advances are found, and then they wonder, wow, it wasn't really the answer. Let's go back and look at that other stuff. And people pile on to the other method for a while, and this
Right.
alternates. So it would be beneficial to the industry if we could integrate these different methods, symbolic and numeric, cognitive versus sensory and perceptual, other ways to look at it. Because we absolutely need both to have anything approaching human intelligence and the utility that we're all looking for as consultants and application scientists.
Very true. Very true. I believe so. Now, just to wrap up, we'll have many more such talks, I'm sure, in the future. But I think one critical thing everybody should realize that the semantic or web or the taxonomy used in typical shopping carts and other kind of retail scenarios are very um, different, right? And ontology can really help there as well, but in medical science, in healthcare, it has an even more mission critical requirement here, right?
In medicine, that's obviously quite different. We can't just make guesses with patient diagnoses and patient health. The cost of getting an answer wrong is very high. And so I came up with this term cognitive guardrails, really with the analogy to automated driving applications. It's great to have a system that reacts most of the time in the right way, instantaneously, does a sensory pattern match. But we also need some guardrails to keep the car on the road because it might guess wrong from time
Yeah,
to time.
yeah,
And if we
yeah.
could have these two processes both applied at once, a sort of deliberative cognitive approach that understands the rules of the road or the rules of medicine and healthcare, as well as a reactive approach that will sort of synthesize a probability from data and guess right most of the time very quickly. If we can have these two processes interacting with each other, I think we'll be a lot closer both to a real AI as well as usable and safe products.
Yeah, and that I think leads to the most important point now, right, which is critical, is responsible AI, which is ethical AI, and an AI which is unbiased and treats everybody fairly, equally. And I'm sure there are many topics around this we can talk in the next session. So before we leave, I just wanted to point out, I saw this article on the National Geographic magazine about a robot. It's called Moxie, and this is from the Medical City Heart Hospital in Dallas. And it helps nurses. It takes care of all the tedious tasks. Now I just wonder what would happen if they were using ontology or true AI, where it can truly interpret, not just avoiding, kind of the obstacles, the regular stuff, but something more useful. Wouldn't that be wonderful if we had some kind of smarter or more intelligent AI utilized there?
Yeah, I'm sure that nurses would love to have the time saving of a robot that can take, blood samples down to the lab so they don't have to walk them down. But it sure would be a lot better if the robot functioned like a human orderly that knew that, for example, that sample was time critical in some way, or it had to be kept at a certain temperature, or that if it fell off the cart, there would be a certain cost associated with that. It would be nice to have the robot be a smart robot that understood what it was carrying, and I bet these days it doesn't.
Yep, yep. We have a long way to go, but it was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for explaining the concepts of AI to us, ontology. Hope to connect with you again in the future. We'll continue to talk about responsible AI and knowledge mining and all the different interesting solutions. Thank you. Appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.